Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. I'm John Ellis. 43. Logistics Director, or rather, former Logistics Director, at Ridgeway Transit Solutions, a position I gave 9 damn years of my life to. I still remember that Friday morning like a scar across my career. "You're not a team player, John." That line from Bryce Winslow hit like a slap I saw coming. I didn't even blink. He said it in that artificial, sterile tone, sitting behind a glass desk in a conference room designed more for intimidation than collaboration. Bryce had been my direct supervisor for 6 months. New blood, fast-tracked from corporate after attending one too many leadership boot camps. The kind of guy who treated buzzwords like scripture. "I've reviewed your division's KPIs. And while the numbers are, well, impressive, we need leadership that aligns with our evolving culture." Translation. He was threatened. Because under my watch, Ridgeway's freight optimization unit had gone from hemorrhaging contracts to becoming the most profitable unit in the company. We cut transit delays by 33%. Increased client renewals by nearly 50%. Revenue soared. But Bryce didn't care. Because success was only valid if it came his way. Not the old school, hands-on, trust-built-in-the-field approach I lived by. He wanted blind compliance. Corporate alignment. Control. "Teamwork is key," he said, tapping his pen against the table like he was leading an orchestra. I gave him a slight nod. "Absolutely. Couldn't agree more." He smirked like I'd just passed a test I didn't even sign up for. That meeting wasn't my end. It was the beginning. I walked out of that room with one truth burning in my chest. Bryce had no idea what kind of engine he just messed with. Because in logistics, you don't just move cargo. You move trust. You move relationships. You move the unseen gears that keep the whole machine humming. I didn't build a department, I built a network. And Bryce? He was about to find out what happens when you mess with the one guy holding all the gears together. The first time I stepped into Ridgeway's freight division, it was a graveyard. Clients were bailing. Drivers were quitting. Warehouse schedules were chaos. It was me, 2 green analysts, and Pete, our warehouse manager, who'd been with the company since the 80s. The first 6 months nearly broke me. I slept in my office 3 nights a week. Learned every dock schedule by heart. I drove 200 miles one night to personally deliver a shipment after a route got cancelled due to flooding. Clients remembered that. Drivers remembered that. It wasn't long before vendors were calling me directly. Drivers had my personal number. Dispatchers trusted my voice over any software. By year 3, we were winning awards. By year 5, our processes were being studied by other departments. But none of that mattered to Bryce. To him, I was non-compliant. Because I didn't ask permission to fix problems. Because I didn't filter decisions through his maze of red tape. He started slowly, review requests, excessive meetings, new documentation systems. Then the whispers came. I learned he'd been asking my team things like, "Do you feel supported by John?" and, "Would you prefer more structured oversight?" He was building a case. Not for improvement. For elimination. The hammer dropped on a Friday. He called a department-wide meeting. Said it was about strategic restructuring. I already knew what was coming. But I showed up early anyway. Took a seat at the back of the glass conference room, watched my team shuffle in, Marcy from account ops, Tony from routing, Sophie and Ian from analytics. Pete stood by the door, arms crossed, already reading the room. Bryce stood at the head like a proud conductor. As part of our growth vision, we'll be transitioning leadership responsibilities across departments, he announced with a fake smile. He talked about innovation and synergy and collective ownership. And then he dropped it. John has decided to pursue new opportunities outside Ridgeway. His responsibilities will be redistributed among the team. Lies. I hadn't decided anything. This was his coup. But here's where Bryce made his first mistake: he underestimated my team. Who's handling the Hawthorne Logistics account now? Ian asked, calm as ever. Bryce blinked. That'll be handled under my direct oversight for now. And reroutes during snow season? John had protocols with Interroute Express, Marcy added, arms folded. We're standardizing those across regions. The new approval system will kick in next week, Bryce replied. I watched their expressions shift. They weren't just concerned, they were strategizing. They'd worked under me for years. They knew what was coming. By the end of the meeting, Bryce had committed to handling direct client relationships, vendor crisis calls, and holiday rerouting, all things he'd never touched before. By Monday, the cracks would start to show. By Wednesday, the walls would shake. And he didn't even see it coming. This is just the beginning. Coming up in part 2, Despair, you'll see what happened when the system Bryce tried to steal fell into chaos, and how I watched it all collapse from the outside with nothing but a quiet smile. There's a moment after you're blindsided, after the floor's been ripped from beneath you, where you don't feel anything. Not anger. Not sorrow. Just a cold, suffocating stillness. That was me that weekend. I went home Friday night, sat on the edge of my bed, still in my work clothes, and stared at the wall until sunrise. My wife, Angela, gently placed her hand on my shoulder. You okay? She whispered. I wanted to lie. Say something brave. But I just muttered, they tossed me out like I was nothing. Because that's what it felt like. 9 years of waking up before dawn, missing anniversaries, sleeping in a chair at HQ to make sure we didn't miss critical freight during snowstorms, and now I was just, gone. I didn't tell my kids. Not yet. I couldn't bear the look in their eyes. The same look I saw in the mirror. The one that asked, what was all that sacrifice for? Monday rolled in like a storm. Technically, I was still on Ridgeway's books until the end of the week, transition assistance, Bryce called it. A formality. My system access was already restricted. My badge only opened the front lobby. The rest of the building, the heartbeat I once controlled, now treated me like a stranger. I walked in anyway. Not for Bryce. Not even for revenge. But for them, my team. I watched from a glass office as the place unraveled in real time. By 9:40 a.m., the first email from Henderson Group came in. Urgent. Why is our time-sensitive shipment not showing updated tracking in the portal? Bryce forwarded it to Marcy and Ian with a passive-aggressive note. Please ensure this is resolved ASAP. Problem was, Henderson's expedited shipments always required manual override through Priority Express. And guess who had the only active authorization credentials? Me. Not anymore. By 10:30, our biggest pharmaceutical client sent a formal request asking for John Ellis or his authorized representative to coordinate the next 3 shipments. Bryce panicked. He barged into Sophie's cubicle, asked her if she could replicate my process. She said no. Not because she couldn't. But because she shouldn't. Our clients trusted me, because I earned it. The system was built around relationships, not checklists. By noon, 3 major vendors had called asking why they hadn't received any response from me. When informed I no longer worked there, they grew cold. One of them even asked, then who the hell is handling our emergency route approvals? Bryce was now buried in what I called the invisible work, the glue that never showed up in presentations, but held the entire operation together. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in my half-boxed office, looking out at the only world I'd known for nearly a decade. That's when Marcy walked in. You're really leaving? She asked softly. I nodded. Wasn't my call. She shut the door behind her. You know there's going to be fallout, right? I'm counting on it. She blinked. You're not mad. I'm devastated, I admitted, voice low. But I'm also done bleeding for people who mistake loyalty for threat. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she set a folder on my desk. What's this? Your legacy, she said. 17 contracts. All signed under your leadership. And guess what most of them have? I opened the folder and froze. Personnel clauses. Client after client had added a line in their agreement, coordination to be handled by John Ellis or a directly designated representative. Meaning? They didn't want Ridgway. They wanted me. And that, right there, was the crack in the dam. By Tuesday morning, the resignation emails started rolling in. Ian, our best analyst, quit before lunch. Sophie followed 2 hours later. Pete put in for early retirement the next morning. 3 warehouse supervisors requested departmental transfers within the same week. Bryce was in freefall. But here's the thing, I didn't orchestrate any of it. Not a single phone call. Not a single persuasive pitch. This wasn't some vendetta plan. This was what happens when you rip the soul out of a machine and expect it to keep running. Angela found me staring out the living room window that night. You've been quiet, she said. I feel like I'm grieving, I told her. And I was. Not just for the job, but for the time I'd lost. For the loyalty that meant nothing. For the memories now tainted by betrayal. But there was something else brewing underneath the grief. A slow burn. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. Bryce didn't just fire me. He lit a match. And he forgot that I know every single bridge, tunnel, and pipeline that keeps this industry moving. If I wanted to, I could rebuild everything he tore down, and leave him standing in the ashes wondering where it all went wrong. But I wasn't ready yet. Not until the next twist revealed itself. And it did. In the form of a phone call. John. This is Lisa from Horizon Logistics. Heard you're free these days. You have time to grab a coffee? That was the first call. 3 more followed by Friday. Turns out, when the word gets out that a freight division collapsed because one man left, companies start noticing. And I wasn't just John from Ridgway anymore. I was the guy who built an empire from a sinking ship. And now, everyone wanted to know if I was ready to build again. You know how they say information is power. That never rang truer than the moment I flipped open the Horizon Logistics contract template and saw what was buried in the vendor clause language, almost identical to what I had once written for Ridgway's top clients. Except now, I wasn't enforcing it for someone else. I was the leverage. Let me back up. After a few quiet days, the fog in my head began to clear. It started with a meeting over breakfast. Douglas Wright, VP of Meridian Transport, Ridgway's biggest regional competitor, sat across from me in a corner booth of a greasy spoon diner off I-64. He wore a dark charcoal suit, no tie, sleeves rolled up. The kind of guy who had scars, not PowerPoint slides. John, he said, buttering his toast like he wasn't offering me the biggest opportunity of my career, we've been watching you for a long time. Watching me? You built something at Ridgway no one else could replicate. You ran operations like a symphony. And you didn't lose a single major client in 9 years. That doesn't happen in logistics. He slid an envelope across the table. VP of Operations. Full authority. Bring whoever you want. Clean slate. You interested? I didn't answer right away. Because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about title, salary, or perks. I was thinking about Bryce. And what would happen to Ridgway when all the gears I'd put in place were spun up elsewhere, by the very team he thought he could replace. I called Sophie first. How's post-Ridgway life treating you? I asked. Peaceful, she chuckled. Though. I missed the chaos a little. Weird, right? Not at all. You busy Friday? Depends. Why? I've got something brewing. Might need someone who understands how to coordinate a 14-hour reroute through 3 weather systems while dealing with a cranky driver in Tuscaloosa. She laughed. I'll bring my laptop. Next was Ian. Then Marcy. Then warehouse managers like Edwin and Travis, folks who knew my style, my tempo, my obsession with precision. Every conversation was casual. But the message was clear. I was building again. And this time, I was building right. That same week, Marcy reached out with a bombshell. She'd been combing through Ridgway's archived vendor contracts, just making sure things were buttoned up before she officially resigned. You're not gonna believe what I found, she said, voice breathless with disbelief. Remember those continuity clauses you helped implement back in 2018? I nodded. Yeah, required that a client's logistics point of contact stay consistent throughout the life of the contract. Well, she continued, 17 of Ridgway's active vendor and client agreements still list you by name. As in, John Ellis must be the primary logistics coordinator, or the contract can be terminated without penalty. I blinked. That can't be right. It is. I cross-checked. Most of those vendors never agreed to update the clause because you were the reason they signed in the first place. The dots connected like a lightning bolt. Bryce didn't just fire me. He severed the very ties that legally bound Ridgway to its most loyal clients. You have any idea how powerful this is? Marcy asked. I did. Because Ridgway didn't just fire a logistics director. They fired the only person who could legally fulfill those contracts without rewriting them, and trust me, no client's gonna wait 6 months for new paperwork when there's a clean exit clause waiting to be used. Which meant one thing. Ridgway was a ticking bomb. And all I had to do was wait. I didn't sabotage anything. I didn't leak contracts or call clients. All I did was exist. Out in the open. Fully available. Competent. Ready. And soon, they came to me. First was Hawthorne Logistics. Then Blackstone Distribution. Each call the same. We're worried about continuity, John. Heard Ridgway let you go. We'd prefer to stay with you, if possible. And that's when the twist landed, hard and poetic. Douglas, my new boss, sat me down a week later and said. We just signed Hawthorne. And they requested you by name. Their contract had your signature in the continuity clause. Ridgway's legal couldn't argue it. He grinned. You're more than a VP now. You're a brand. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Because 9 years ago, I was a nobody sleeping in a warehouse cot, begging vendors to give us one more chance. Now. I was the guy Ridgway couldn't legally survive without. The real kicker. Bryce didn't even know. He was still walking around with his clipboard, handing out buzzwords and rearranging flowcharts, while the floor beneath him was already collapsing. Marcy told me that corporate had started asking questions. 3 clients had raised concerns. 2 vendors paused shipments. 1 logistics partner had requested contract renegotiation, due to unapproved personnel changes. The execs were spooked. And Bryce? He was still pretending it was all just a transition hiccup. But the dominoes were falling fast now. And in the next chapter, I'd stop watching quietly from the sidelines. By now, I'd stopped asking myself if this was revenge. It wasn't some grand vendetta with torches and fury. This was logistics, and in logistics, precision always beats rage. So while Bryce flailed around trying to control the narrative, I did what I've always done, I built. And this time, I wasn't patching a sinking ship. I was designing a fleet. At Meridian, I was given full latitude. No red tape. No clipboard warriors. I had my pick of people, processes, and priorities. The first thing I did. I called the team, not the whole team, but the heartbeat. Sophie. Ian. Pete. Marcy. Travis. Two of our best warehouse leads. A fleet coordinator who'd been with Ridgway since before I arrived. We met in a dusty backroom of Meridian's Louisville facility. Not some fancy boardroom. Just folding chairs, coffee, and the scent of fresh ambition. I'm not here to drag Ridgway through the mud, I told them. I'm here to build something better. From the ground up. They didn't need convincing. They just needed a map. We spent 2 weeks reverse engineering everything that made Ridgway great before corporate strangled it. The systems we used, the vendor relationships, the emergency routing protocols, the trust chains. And then we improved them. Made them leaner. Sharper. More flexible. I worked side by side with software engineers at Meridian to develop a hybrid dispatch tool, faster than what Ridgway ever approved. Sophie ran simulations for weather contingencies. Ian built predictive analytics to flag risk points in real time. By week 3, we were onboarding clients. Quietly. Professionally. With contracts they couldn't refuse. Why? Because I knew their pain points, and Bryce didn't even know their names. Then came the clients who didn't call me first. So I called them. Not with pitch decks. Just one sentence. I know what Ridgway promised. I'm the one who made those promises real. Some paused. Some hesitated. Most didn't. By the end of the month, we'd flipped 3 major Ridgway clients to Meridian. Not by slashing prices, but by offering the one thing no one else could. Continuity. We had the playbook. We were the playbook. And the word got out fast. Meanwhile, at Ridgway, the mood had shifted. Marcy, still playing quiet observer, texted me one night. Bryce called a meeting today. Tried to inspire us with a vision for digital-first routing strategies. Half the team looked like they wanted to throw a stapler at him. Then. Client relations is melting. Vendors are complaining. Corporate is breathing down his neck. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because this wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about what I learned in those quiet hours after being blindsided. You don't need to burn a building down. You just need to remove the foundation. That foundation was us. The relationships. The loyalty. The unspoken agreements built on consistency and reliability. Bryce tried to replace it with templates and titles. But clients don't stay for templates. They stay for people. And just as we were hitting full stride at Meridian, another twist rolled in like thunder. Pete walked into my new office, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Bryce called me last night." I froze. What did he want? He offered me a promotion. More money. Said he needed help stabilizing the warehouse side. Pete chuckled bitterly. I told him I already had a job. A real one. With a real leader. He paused. And then I asked if he even remembered my wife's name. He didn't. You always did. That hit me. Because Pete was the kind of guy who never gave his loyalty lightly. But once he did. He'd follow you through fire. That's the difference Bryce never understood. You can buy compliance, but you earn commitment. By the end of that week, I had 7 former Ridgway employees on board at Meridian, handling everything from procurement to dispatch. They didn't just leave a company. They came home. And that's when we hit critical mass. Clients started requesting to transfer accounts wholesale. Some even cited Ridgway's leadership instability as justification for early termination. I wasn't pushing them. They came on their own. Because chaos has a scent. And Ridgway reeked. At our next team meeting, I stood before them, my new crew, my old crew, the people who got it, and I said. Bryce thought he could lead with a spreadsheet. But leadership isn't metrics. It's memory. It's trust. And from this moment on, we don't just run freight, we run loyalty. They erupted. Not in applause. But in quiet nods. Focused eyes. That rare expression people wear when they're part of something that matters. The final nail? That was coming. But I wasn't rushing it. Because Bryce still thought he was managing disruptions. He had no idea he was watching an exodus. One routed and scheduled to perfection. The morning Ridgway lost the Henderson account, Bryce didn't see it coming. Which is poetic, considering I built the Henderson pipeline from scratch. Their VP of Operations, Denise Rourke, called me directly. "John," she said, calm and clipped, "we just sent our formal cancellation notice to Ridgway." I leaned back in my chair. "Everything okay?" "No. But it will be." She sighed. Bryce sat on a critical shipment for 3 days because the new process requires 4 layers of approval. It was a medical equipment run. For a neonatal ICU. That made my blood run cold. I didn't respond. She continued. "We pulled the plug this morning. Our legal team referenced the continuity clause and walked it right out. And we're signing with Meridian. Today." I nodded slowly. "You sure about that?" "We're sure about you." That was the start. By noon, Blackstone Distribution, our second largest client at Ridgway, was on the line. "We've been reviewing our options," their logistics head told me. "Our new coordinator at Ridgway doesn't know a box truck from a bread truck." They asked about terms. Asked about bringing over the same team I'd built. Asked if we could take over that week. I said yes. Quietly, methodically, the floodgates opened. Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. Pete texted me. "Client review meeting today." Bryce pacing like a wet cat in a microwave. 9:12 a.m. Ridgway's vendor portal lit up with 3 emergency change requests they couldn't authorize. The only people who could. Already worked for me. 10:03 a.m. A pharmaceutical account canceled a multimillion-dollar Q4 distribution plan with Ridgway, citing trust erosion in leadership communication. Their words. Not mine. 11:47 a.m. A Ridgway exec forwarded me a LinkedIn message. "John, I know things ended awkwardly. Any interest in consulting to help smooth the waters?" I didn't even reply. That week felt like a well-oiled orchestra, chaos for them, calm precision for us. Clients didn't leave because I asked them to. They left because Bryce made staying unbearable. And when they turned to see who still knew how to steer the ship, they found me. At one point, Sophie walked into my office holding her tablet and said, "Blackstone's COO just messaged me. She wants to know how we pulled off the Atlanta reroute so fast." "What did you tell her?" "That we actually talked to our drivers." We both laughed. It felt good. Not vindictive. Right. Like we were finally running things the way they were supposed to run. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Friday morning, 7:45 a.m. Marcy called. "Bryce is out." I blinked. Fired? Reassigned? Technically. Corporate put him on strategic development out of the Charlotte office. No direct reports. Translation, exiled. How'd it go down? 3 clients gone in a week. 2 vendors halting routes. 1 angry article in the Louisville Business Journal about management instability at Ridgway. Corporate had to act. She hesitated. "And they asked about you." I raised an eyebrow. "Me? They want to know if you'd come back as a consultant. Try to undo some of the damage." I didn't laugh. Didn't rage. I just leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the silence say everything. I didn't go back. Not because I was bitter. but because I'd already moved forward. What we'd built at Meridian wasn't just a rebound, it was better. Cleaner. Faster. Human. And most importantly, respected. By Sunday, Ridgway had lost 4 clients. 3 more were under review. 2 vendors were suspending partnerships until contract language is clarified. The building I used to call home. Now a monument to one man's ego. And the biggest irony? Every ounce of chaos was born from the thing Bryce said I lacked. Teamwork. He never realized that true teamwork isn't about memos or approval flows. It's about trust, loyalty, shared purpose. He dismantled that, and the system collapsed under his feet. 3 months had passed since I walked out of Ridgway with a cardboard box and a silent vow never to look back. Now, I stood in a glass-walled office at Meridian Transport, overlooking a warehouse bustling like a symphony, each truck, driver, and load moving in harmony. Our harmony. And that's when the unexpected twist came. An email. Subject line, meeting request, Ridgway recovery strategy. Attached was a proposal. Not from Bryce. From Ridgway's senior executive team. People who hadn't said a word to me in nearly a decade. The email was direct. John. Ridgway is undergoing a significant restructuring following recent client losses. We acknowledge the critical role you played in building our freight optimization division. We would like to explore the possibility of retaining you as an executive-level consultant to assist in client retention and operational realignment. Compensation and full authority negotiable. Please let us know if you're open to a meeting. I read it twice. Then once more, just to be sure. They weren't asking for help. They were asking for salvation. From the very man they discarded without a second thought. Angela watched me read it over dinner. You going to take it? She asked gently. I shook my head. I don't know. You built that place, she said. And they let someone like Bryce throw it away. I nodded slowly. But what if I could rebuild it? Make it right? She looked at me for a long time. Then make sure you're doing it to build something, not just to crush what's left. That stayed with me. The next morning, I called a meeting with Douglas, Meridian CEO. Before I do anything, I told him, you need to see this. I slid the proposal across his desk. He read it, expression unreadable. When he finished, he looked up. You thinking about going back? Not full-time. Just, a one-time offer to stabilize their mess. But I won't even consider it unless I have your blessing. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. John, let me tell you something. I've been in this business 30 years. I've seen empires rise and fall. But what you've built here. With these people. It's not just a department. It's a legacy. He paused. You want to consult for Ridgway? Fine. But I want them to pay for every ounce of your time. And I want our logo on every solution you give them. He reached for his coffee. And when you walk into that building, I want them to remember who they let go. So I agreed. Not to help Ridgway. But to show them what real leadership looked like. The next week, I walked into Ridgway HQ for the first time since my firing. The lobby looked the same, but the energy was different. Hollow. Nervous. A receptionist who didn't recognize me smiled awkwardly. Mr. Ellis? I nodded. They're expecting me. Marcy met me in the elevator. She hadn't left, not yet, but her resignation letter was already typed and saved to her desktop. They're desperate, she whispered. 2 more clients are circling the drain. As the elevator dinged, she added, don't let them spin it. I didn't plan to. Inside the boardroom, 6 executives sat around a sleek table. No Bryce. He'd been shipped off to some special project in Charlotte. Word was, he was tasked with culture alignment initiatives. The irony nearly broke me. The room fell silent as I entered. I didn't sit. I placed my folder on the table and said, "Before we begin, let me be clear, this is a consultation. Not a rescue." The CEO, an older man with thinning silver hair and desperation in his eyes, nodded. Understood. I clicked a remote and pulled up a projection. Systems built on trust, what Ridgway forgot. Over the next hour, I walked them through every failure they'd overseen since my exit. Why vendor escalations were collapsing. How their routing delays lost clients. Why their new approval system paralyzed emergency shipments. And most importantly, how their leadership vacuum turned a thriving division into a crumbling liability. Not once did I mention Bryce by name. But his fingerprints were all over every failure. When I finished, the CFO asked, "So, what would it take to bring stability back?" I paused. Then, calmly, I said, "Every solution will come through Meridian, not me. You'll contract with us. You'll pay our rates. And you'll credit my team for every improvement we implement." There was silence. Then the CEO nodded. Done. That was the moment the game flipped, again. Ridgway was now paying Meridian to repair what they broke. Paying me. Paying Sophie. Paying Ian. Paying Pete. They weren't just clients. They were students now. And we were the ones teaching the class. After the meeting, I walked through my old department. Some of the same faces were there, tired, stretched thin. I nodded to them. Some nodded back. One mouthed, "Thank you." I didn't stop walking. Because I wasn't there to gloat. I was there to remind them. That teamwork isn't about control. It's about respect. They say karma takes time. But in logistics, the right delay at the wrong time. That can bring down a giant in days. By the end of my first month consulting for Ridgway, through Meridian, they'd lost 6 major contracts, 4 vendor agreements, and their board was in chaos. I wasn't twisting any knives. I was just showing them the mirror. And the reflection wasn't pretty. The final act came not with a crash, but with a message. Tuesday, 6:12 a.m. An email. Subject, request for call, Bryce Winslow. For a moment, I just stared at it. I hadn't heard his name in weeks. He'd been shuffled off to some empty title role, stripped of staff, resources, and respect. And now he wanted to talk. I clicked reply. Available at 9 a.m., on the dot. My phone rang. I answered, no greeting. "John," he began, sounding like someone who hadn't slept in days, "I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from. You're not wrong. I just want to say, what happened at Ridgway, the way I handled it, it wasn't personal. It was corporate alignment." I chuckled dryly. That's funny. Because to me, it was deeply personal. Silence. "I know," he said, voice cracking. "And I screwed up." I didn't respond. He continued. They're talking about layoffs. Shutdowns. Legal action over the continuity clauses. I didn't know. I didn't understand how critical your systems were. I finally spoke. You didn't want to understand. You wanted control. You wanted people who followed your system, not the one that actually worked. I know. Can you help me? That question lingered in the air like a rotting smell. And then I said something I never planned to say. "No, Bryce. I already did help you. You just didn't listen." Click. I ended the call. No theatrics. No curses. Just the truth. That was my final word to the man who thought firing me would strengthen his grip. Weeks passed. I finalized Ridgway's restructuring roadmap and handed the last pieces to their internal replacements, none of whom had been hired by Bryce. They sent a final check. With it, a handwritten note from the CEO. "Thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like." I filed it away. I didn't need it. But it was nice to have. At Meridian, things thrived. Sophie had been promoted to Director of Routing Strategy. Pete, retired and smiling, still consulted once a week, usually just to drop in, drink terrible coffee, and share warehouse wisdom that made engineers take notes. Ian built a new dashboard that predicted route failures 18 hours ahead of time. And me? I finally stopped watching over my shoulder. Because the empire I'd built didn't belong to Ridgeway anymore. It never had. It belonged to the people who respected it. Who earned it. And who kept it running through storms, bad bosses, and all the betrayals in between. I took a call from a young logistics student one afternoon, someone who'd read about the Ridgeway resignation chain in a trade publication. He asked, "Mr. Ellis, what's the biggest lesson you learned through all that?" I thought for a second. Then I said, "Teams don't fail because of chaos. They fail when the wrong people try to lead them through it." He didn't get it at first. But someday, he would. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.